Hello Internet, welcome to the Collective Arcana, a channel all about tabletop gaming. Today we're going to talk about Miss Vex'ahlia. Oh, she is so pretty. So far all I've done is prep her and blocked out some color within her face, but there's not a lot of good reference art that matches this sculpt, so it takes a little bit of creativity to figure out how you want to lay out the color, what you think looks best. And I've just blocked the colors out. These aren't the final colors, but I kind of want to show you what I'm going to go with. So I'm going to do brown leather for her boots, her gloves, and then the leather armor on her chest here. And then for her like pants, I'm going to do this sort of grayish color. I'm going to contrast that way better. Like I said, I'm just blocking out color. I'm going to make this the same shade of blue as I do the back. And then on the inside here, I'm going to make it a little darker so that it doesn't all look too much the same. So it's like the inside of her cape has some kind of lining. Obviously, she's got her little blue feathers in her hair that we all love so much. And then something that was a little tricky is if you look really closely, she's actually got some fur. And it looks like the bulk of it's on her back and it goes over one shoulder. And then it looks like it kind of goes down here. So I'm hoping this will help you see what's going on with the model. It's just blocked out right now. So something else I want to point out is that the armor on her arms is a little confusing. So I just kind of wanted to show you what's actually going on. It looks like her elbow. This isn't the best contrast, I'm sorry, but her elbow is exposed here, so it gives her elbow like the freedom to bend basically. So if you look, there's actually a line right here, right there, and then here, and then it's just solid. And then for the other side, and then for the other arm, you can't really see it from the top view, but if you go to the side here, there's a little gap there as well. So just think of it functionally. Her bow's in the way. Yeah. Think of it functionally. If you were wearing armor on all over your elbow, it would be hard to bend. So just think of where those spaces would be, and you should be able to find them pretty easily. So I guess I'll work on the cape now. So you'll notice I'm using the same colors of blues for all of the Vox Machina minis that have blue in them, and that's just so they look together as a set. But with Percy's coat, I used this color and this color pretty heavily. So I'm probably going to do that with her as well. They don't need to be an exact match. I'm probably going to go a little more towards this aqua-y color just based on the art that I've seen. And then with Jester, she had sort of these two colors with a little bit of purple. So when both sets are all done and they're all together, they'll visually tie in, I think, really pretty. So right now I'm just kind of trying to get her base coat here, which I start with the mid-tone, which I don't know if this is what you're quote-unquote supposed to do, but this is my method, and I think that with any kind of artsy-fartsy thing that we all find our own methods that work for us. Try not to get hung up on the right and wrong way to do everything. So far I've just layered up my base color, which I did by thinning out my paints and layering little by little. It gives a smoother look than if you just put it on straight. And then on the inside I'm doing this darker blue, this like royally blue. And that way when I go to highlight this piece right here, it'll have more of that turquoise color, and there'll be a nice contrast between the two fabrics, as if this had some kind of lining in it. So I'm going to try to show you some wet blending on camera, but until I can get a workstation set up, I'm not sure that I can really paint on camera too much. I have some ideas, but the setup I have now, it's not working. I tried really hard, and it's just I'm having to bend in weird ways and hurting my back, so I will figure it out. But for now, I'm just going to show you in phases and do what I can. And so for the back here, what we're going to do is try to wet blend and make a nice smooth contrast between the shadows and the highlights. And so for this base color, I just did that straight like Percy blue. Let's see if I have I paint on my hand a lot, in case you haven't noticed. This is my real palette, but this is like the color I used, thinned out to about like this consistency. And then for the inside of her cloak and for the shadows, I'm going to start with adding this more traditional blue. So as you can see, they're pretty different. This is much more purpley blue. So that's what we're going to use for our first contrast. So paint it in the dark spots. Dark spots. Get some water and paint up the light spots. I know some people struggle with wet blending, but it's actually really easy once you get the hang of it. It's just working with the water, using water to move paint around. So if you were doing a gradient, you could start at the bottom with your wet darker color, and then you could stop midway up. So this will be what we do with bow, for an example. Now I'm taking all the paint off my brush and just having water, and then literally just blend it with only water until you get that nice gradient. And I'll probably go into this with bow too, because you get to actually see the different colors with her, because the gradient's a lot more dramatic. But that's just a little sneak peek of what that looks like. But that's not what we're doing here, so it's basically just ink washing at this point, and then using water to move and control where things go, and then using the water to lift up. And then using the water to lift up in spots. So right now, I've just got water on my brush, and I'm going over these highest points. Just to lift up some of that darker blue. And we're going to highlight too, so this is just to help with that build up when we go to build the highlight. You could stop here, but you're going to get a much more dramatic effect if you also highlight. So we've got some different shades going on in there. So here's what it looked like before when it was flat. Just one flat color. And then here's what it looks like. So now we're getting some different shades in there. So we gotta let this dry before we do anything else to it. Let's see. While I'm waiting for that, I'm just gonna add some more of this color down because it's still not even yet. The inside of her cape is really difficult to get into. I have some interesting brushes here. Let's see if they help. These like crazy long bristles. Get into some little tight spots maybe, like this. Underneath her cape is so hard to get to. That's kind of why I didn't want to do her boots and stuff all the way up yet, because I knew that I was going to get blue all over everything. I can barely get in there. I will say these long bristles seem to be helping me. Oh, probably just made such a mess on her boot. No, not really. Just gonna clean up the little spot of blue I got on her shoe here, on her leg. So you can see that contrast is coming along pretty nicely, and that's without any highlights or shadows. So with the back of her cape, I'm probably gonna black wash, and then I'll probably just highlight with this same kind of color with just a little bit of like a grayish. I'll probably put some gray in this color. We'll see. So here's the back. We've got some fun colors happening back here. So now I'm gonna actually take that same blue, that dark blue, and I'm gonna thin it out less. I'm not gonna wash all over like I did before. I'm just gonna go into the nooks and crannies this time. So if you're not somebody who draws or paints or colors or anything like that, just a little 101 advice here for shading, which is what we're doing. Pick a light source, so we'll just say right where we're at, and just imagine if this were real, where would the light hit it, where would the shadows go? So anything where there's an object, like here, she's got this on her back, so it's going to cast some shadows down here, so we'll want to shade basically where that's touching. And then up against here, probably a little shadow where the fur is, that kind of thing. Some people do some really awesome, you know, lighting and shadowing effects, especially with like armor and stuff like that. I kind of haven't played around with that yet because I sort of feel like while I want to encourage highlights and shadows and lowlights, the Mini is actually 3D, so I trust it to make real shadows and stuff like that. So like for armor, I use real metallic paint so that it gets to shine naturally. But I've seen some really cool, you know, effects that people have done. I just don't think it's my style, but I certainly appreciate them. I think they look really cool. I'm gonna keep this piece up here just so you can see what it looks like flat. So some people, they do a really great job at painting in the lines and cleanly, but they can't figure out what it is that makes their Mini not look as detailed as some of the others, and it really is just because they're not doing shading. So I'm gonna leave this piece up here just for reference to what a flat color looks like, and that way when we're done with the back of the cape here, you can see what the difference is. And maybe if you're somebody who's been painting in the lines and you're like, oh, this looks, you know, I'm doing a good job, and then when you're done you're like, what is off about this? It's probably just that. It's probably that you're maybe just doing flat colors. Ink washes go a long way, and you don't have to go quite as high, you know, as many details and layers as I'm doing here. You could just ink wash it once and highlight it once and call it a day. Okay, while she was drying, I actually worked on a dragon, just priming him, and accidentally found this slightly better camera angle, I think. So let's try this. We're ready to do the highlights now, which are my favorite part, because that's where all the pretty bright colors come out. So I'm taking a turquoisey color and mixing it in with our mid-tone blue color, and I'm going to thin it out a little bit. And we're going to start building up the highlights only. So we're not going to do like a ink wash situation. We're just gonna do light, thin layers of these lighter colors, and we're gonna build on them. So hopefully you can see a little better this time. I'm gonna take it here on this high bit, So the first strokes, you know, they're not going to be super obvious. And that's what gives you the really cool look, is building it up gradually rather than layering it on. But it really does make a difference. You just have to be patient with it. See a little better over here. I got too straight of a line there, I think. See if I can blend that down a little bit. I need to move my camera again. I'm gonna pull that down. So shadows are a little more dramatic than I like up here, so I'm gonna tone them down just a little bit. Alright, so now I've got a lot more of this like turquoise color. So we're gonna lighten it up even more. But we're gonna do smaller surface coverage, smaller areas, much more controlled. So that looks pretty streaky, so I'm gonna water it down. I think I need to move my light. I'm going to take this edge, do bright blue, select it careful. This part is hard for me to do on the camera because I normally sit all crazy and I have it like right up by my face so I can see what I'm doing. And I got a light right by my cheek right now. But I'm gonna do my best. Here in a couple months I'll hopefully have a free room for a really nice setup for the camera. So you can see it's pretty wet. More highlights. I love this color so much. It looks like the ocean. It's a little splotchy, so I'm just adding water to smooth it out. And that's a big problem with light colors. One that I'm still trying to figure out. I read online that if you have a problem with like chalky paint, which I clearly do, to try adding like Dawn dishwashing liquid into your water, into your tap water, and then using filtered water, which I always think that's a little cheesy to say, oh, your water is so dirty that you need filtered water. But it turns out our water is kind of gross, so we we do use filtered water, but I hadn't been using it to paint with. So I'm just gonna go ahead and use filtered water from now on. Oh, it just seemed a little extreme. Take a small brush. Now let's water it down on the edges especially. This corner one more time. Lighten it up over here some more. Okay. Real talk. I'm pretty unhappy with this little bit right here. Looks like my shadows got a little a little out of hand, so I'm going to fix them by taking that mid-tone blue, and I'm going to clean up the shadow that went a little further out than I wanted it to. And then when that dries, I'll come back and highlight it back. There we go. That looks better. Smooth out some of these lines a little bit. Building up more. The more you build, the brighter the color will be. Just make sure you don't hit those lower parts so that you can have that contrast. The higher the contrast, the more textured it'll look and the more realistic it'll look. And they are small, so you kind of have to be dramatic. It's like stage makeup. You know, that you want to be able to see it from a distance. See up here. Just want to separate these individual spots. So on this corner, I kind of want to flare out the highlight because there's a little fabric showing here. So we'll wet blend it down so it's not just a straight line. So my camera died. But so I just added some more of those layers and built it up. There wasn't much more to talk about anyway. And now I want to tie it all together. So she's got this bright blue, and I'm thinking to tie it together. This might seem a little strange, but I'm going to ink wash with that primary blue color again. See if I can show you. My hot mess of a palette, this color here. And that'll put like a filter almost over the whole thing and make it one uniform look. So I'm trying to see if I have a good bigger brush for this, and let's water it down. I've got to be the messiest painter. I do this when I'm painting houses and stuff too, and walls. I get it everywhere. All right. So those highlights will pop through, and it'll settle down in the shadows, and it'll just tie everything together and make it look nice and smooth. So like before, I'm going to add just a little extra water onto the high spots and pull it down and away. So I kind of want to put, just looking at it through the camera, kind of want to pull some up on the bottom. A little bit of wet blending. Just kind of moving the water around. They should make fingerless paper towel gloves for people like me. Alright, so again, if you're painting a flat color, instead of doing highlights and shadows and washes, you'll get something like this. This is how we started, right? But if you add washes and highlights and stuff like that, you'll get a less wet version of this. Maybe I should wait till it's dry to show you again. So while that dries, let's see, let's take, oh, we didn't wash this. Neglected a little bit in the front here. I keep forgetting about it. So if I was going to do the dry brush method on this, here's what I would do. I would do that same base color, and then I would ink wash with like the dark, super dark blue, and then I would highlight with that turquoisey light blue, and then maybe do one more wash over it. I like dry brushing for a lot of things. I just like to have more control over it on big surface areas like this. And I might still, I don't know, maybe when this dries. Sometimes it's fun to take like a makeup brush. Like I have this big guy here. It was from like a foundation thing that I obviously don't use for makeup anymore. But I might, after this is dry, I might hit the back of it just really fast. Just for the very highlights. And I'll probably do that with like a very light version of that turquoise. So the front of our cape, I want to just add some, I think I'm going to do like grayish light blue. So I'm not going to get any of that turquoise stuff involved. It's not invited to the party. I'm just going to use, let's use the blue that we started with, which is that primary blue again, that we just ink washed with. And how about, I think I'm going to use the dark gray. This is a medium gray. So, I know my palette's a hot mess here. You probably can't even tell what's going on. So, this gray. It's just a good, standard, normal, medium gray. Mix it in with this blue. You don't need to mix much in there because the blue will go a long way. So we've got sort of this like, grab a little more muddied color going on, which is exactly what I want. So we're just going to take these high spots, which are a little hard to see. This angle I'm in, this might be too light. Let's find out. This honestly might be too light. I think it is. Which is good because I can show you how to erase paint. So basically just take a clean brush with only water and one of the more stiff bristles helps. If you have super soft bendy bristles, it doesn't typically pull up as well. And then if you do that and you kind of get it real watery but it's not coming up, just take another completely dry brush and you can soak it up. Good handy tip, you should know how to erase paint. So I'm going to try this color. I know it doesn't look all that different, but it has been black washed. So I'm actually going to almost do like a type of dry brush here. I'm going to get most of this off with my hand paper towel. And I'm going to almost like do a dry brush situation here. It's really hard to get in there. That's better. I'm just very lightly it's really hard to see. Not so dry brush. Alright, so now I'm just going to add some shadows back in to the deepest parts. Eee. Then we have the edge of her cape, which is just kind of wonky right now. I'm just going to paint this black. Maybe leave the very edges. And then when I go back, if I decide to do the dry brush thing, I'll maybe hit the very edges of that. Looks kind of cool though, the way it is, so. That about covers the cape except for this. Well, I guess that's not technically her cape, so. So I'm going to finish her up in the light where I can actually see her and check back in. Okay, I've got Miss Vex'ahlia all finished up. I'll go over a couple little things really fast. So for the back, just like we talked about, just continue to layer all that up. And then I just did one final ink wash with that bright primary blue to tie it all together. For the fur, I just did a neutrally off-white color, and then I washed it with brown, and then I washed it with black. Then I hit it a little bit with a dry brush, just very lightly in a couple of spots. So for the arrows, let me see if I can zoom in for you. So I originally painted all the top, that whole top bit, one color, and ink washed it, and I wasn't really happy with it. You could definitely get away with that, and maybe it'll look better if you do it maybe in a different color than white. But I decided to just go ahead and paint in the little feather bits, and I think it looks pretty good compared to what I had before. So that's what I did for that. Okay, moving on to the front. She's got a lot of detail, so I just wanted to talk about a couple of things. The first one is, especially if you've got this model handy, if you like tilt it back and look at it, she's got some pretty interesting stuff going on up here with her tatas. It's like there's 4 of them. I'm not really sure what's going on there, so I just sort of painted it dark so that it would just live in the shadows, and when you put her upright you can't really tell. So yeah, it looks like the armored part starts way down here, but these are almost like, I don't know, use your best judgment, but this is what I did. And then for her torso, I ended up actually painting in those lines because the dry brush was just, I guess, where there's just so much going on, it wasn't really getting in there the way I wanted it to, and it was getting kind of muddied up. So that's what I did personally. And then just a note about, there's a lot of browns going on here with the color choices I made. You could use black for some of these places too, but her boots, her gloves, her armor, her bow, the arrow, they're all different shades of brown, so I wanted to at least put some variance in them. I made her bow like a more yellowy brown, a lighter one, and then, or the arrow, I'm sorry, but then the bow I did like a reddish wash on, and then the leathers I just made standard brown. I also washed her belt a little bit too, just to break it up a little bit. I would recommend doing an ink wash and a dry brush, especially on things like her gloves. They're pretty detailed. Let's focus back. There we go. She's got a couple of belt buckles. She's got one here. And then she's got one there, there, and there. So she's got a total of 4 up here. And then there's some little ones on her boots. I almost wish I wouldn't have painted those because they just don't really make a ton of sense, but they're small, so. And then with her bow, I didn't really see any artwork that I could really reference for this, so I just did my own thing. I've seen a couple of different ones where they use blue on the bow, so that's an option you could go with. Then of course she has the one, you could maybe make it look like it's wrapped in vines if you're going off of the actual show. So there's a lot of options. This is a really cool mini and a really cool pose, but there's not a lot of guidance on how to do the color, so you get to make, you know, your own choices and do it however you want. So hopefully this helped you, maybe helped you pick colors out a little bit, see the details divided out. And of course next I will be tackling a trinket body, so stay tuned for that, and I really hope you enjoyed this and it helped you. If it did, we'd really appreciate a like and a subscribe, but thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.